Hi, I'm Rebecca Grace, and you're listening to A Shark's Perspective.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Kenny, but friends call me Shark. I'm a keynote speaker, strategist, a shark diver, host of this show, and your chief shark officer. If you're like me, then you work often on your website. But for many, though, in trying to decide on what platform to use, where to host it, and so forth, you can only Google those options so much before it becomes overwhelming for most, especially if web design or graphic design isn't part of your bailiwick. But it's important to make the right choices and then be able to own them in case you want to do something with a site later, like make enhancements on a regular basis, add some code, drop a custom font, for example. But is the platform what's holding your site back, or is it something else? This is something I run into all the time with people and brands whose website is their baby, but quite honestly, most don't even know if their baby is ugly. So how do you build $1 million website without spending, well, just way too much? Rebecca Grace of Rebecca Grace Designs is a Squarespace expert and website designer who helps hundreds of Squarespace designers push past the limitations of the Squarespace editor to design beautiful custom websites that are mobile friendly and search engine optimized. And on this episode, we'll discuss website design, code versus no code, various WYSIWYG website builders like Squarespace, WordPress, Wix, etc., working with templates, paying too much for a new site versus what you really need to build a killer site, working with freelancers, SEO and being found, mobile-friendly design, custom CSS, integrating with Zapier, Acuity, ConvertKit, Shopify, Heat Maps, and many more, crawling with your XML sitemap, Zendaya, Shania, and how Dolly likes to build a site that works 9 to 5 and 5 to 9, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a graceful web designer with a graceful shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Rebecca, welcome to A Shark's Perspective. Would you please give us a brief overview of your background and career to date?
Yeah, so my name is Rebecca Grace. I'm a Squarespace expert and coder, and I focus mainly now on helping other Squarespace designers and people design their own Squarespace site. So I do offer full design services, but I kind of more passionate about coaching and helping people design their own sites and other Squarespace designers code for their client sites.
Well, I was Googling something, doing something to my site, and I found a video of you, and that's how I initially got over to you and the stuff you offer. But we're going to talk a lot about no-code websites like this today. But out of curiosity, why are you all in on Squarespace? Why was that the platform you wanted?
So my favorite part is the design. I don't tend to like to do the retainer stuff. So I wanted my clients to be able to take the site and be able to update it and manage it themselves. And I found that Squarespace was the best platform for that in terms of me being able to design it and then hand it over, and then very quickly be able to know how to update it and manage it without having to be super hands-on. So that's why I chose Squarespace versus I started on WordPress, and I just found it a lot more hands-on. So I switched over to Squarespace, and now I find it a lot easier to kind of hand that website over to clients.
Could not agree more. And I used to code for quite a long time in HTML initially, and then wrote some Java and JavaScript and built a lot of sites. And then I just really sort of got romanced by a lot of the tools, and the sites were great for me, but as I started to hand them over to other people, that's where I really noticed. I just wanted to make certain that they were capable of being able to do a lot of this themselves. But one of the reasons I find this part of website building fascinating is, one, the explosion of these tools and how much they've gotten a lot easier to use. But the two is the number of people who are building sites, especially for their personal brands. There are solopreneurs who put up a web storefront during the last decade plus, or even part of the Great Resignation. They've all had to do that. And the stock prices have generally reflected that quick uptick. But as a professional speaker, I've had to have a website, of course, for myself. Mm-hmm. That's a very important part of my own marketing mix and for any professional speaker. But not that long ago, I was making some adjustments to my own site and adding some custom CSS. And then later in the day, a group of speakers that I knew were discussing websites. And I was listening to a fellow speaker who was giving advice to the group about websites in general. And the guy's very smart. He didn't have a marketing or coding background, but very smart. And he was talking about building out his new website because he thought it was going to make him look a lot better to have a site that he invested a lot of money in. And I say a lot of money in that he was spending more than 10,000. So I went back and later looked at the new site and I was blown away. Not in that it looked that much better, but blown away because I realized how much money he had just wasted. And he didn't have control after because of a lack of knowledge on his own part about how to make those changes later without going back to a developer and spending more money. Mm-hmm. Now, I fully realize that not everybody is a developer. They may not like website building at all. But what do you think it takes to build a killer site with a no-code website tool like a Squarespace, Wix, or any of these, different editors, GoDaddy, and so forth?
Yeah, I think that, it takes time, especially if you have let's say you have no experience whatsoever in building a website. It can take time as it does to learn any program, but it probably doesn't take as much time as you think, especially with the resources that are out there. So for example, Squarespace has templates you can choose from, and you can choose a template that's very close to what you're looking for and need on your site. Go in and change out images and text, especially if you want a very, very basic site, just to kind of let people know who you are and information about you as a speaker, basically a resume online, then you can do that in a weekend, a week. Obviously, the more you want added to it, the longer it takes, but you can get templates from Squarespace. You can even purchase templates from other designers. They sell templates that you can. And so obviously, if you're just wanting information and really basic things, you can put it together in a couple weeks.
Less than that.
Yeah, less than that, I would say, especially if you want, like as a designer, I can do a 5-page website with all the images, the blog, the gallery, all of that in 2 weeks. And that includes coded options, mobile friendly, SEO, all of that. If somebody wants a site that is very basic, just text and images, a week, maybe, right? And so if you have no experience, it's obviously going to take you a little bit longer, but it's really not as hard as people think. And you do not need code to put a website together. Obviously, as a coder, I advocate for using code to push past the boundaries of what you can do. But you don't need code, especially in Squarespace, to do it. You drag and drop blocks around and you're ready to go. So you can have a website up and going within a week. And then obviously the more intense it is, the longer it's going to take.
Yeah. When you say a week, that's not even labor. That's really some discussion back and forth. That's conversations you have with whoever the end user is.
Yeah. I'm not saying a week of 10-hour days.
Yeah. It's a couple hours in
a
work
week,
time
a couple hours a day. Yeah.
If you know what you're doing. So, if you were recommending a simple website tool to a really good friend or close relative who wasn't buying from you or would never call you for free advice, then why would you recommend Squarespace versus Wix or WordPress or GoDaddy or one of them?
Mm-hmm. So with WordPress specifically, so I started out in WordPress, and I found that a lot of the back end updating you had to be in charge of. And so if you weren't paying attention or didn't know what was going on and had, let's say your PHP file was out of date, your entire site would kind of crash down and you'd have to get somebody to go in and update that file for you. And so there was a lot of back end stuff that you needed to kind of be on top of and make sure it was constantly updated. So it's very hands-on. With Squarespace, they do all of that backend stuff for you. And so the only time you need to touch your site is if you want to change text or images or, update things on the site in terms of content, but you didn't have to touch anything else. And so that's why I recommend it generally to people that don't have a coding knowledge or want a very hands-off site. I find Squarespace, Wix are very hands-off that way. I don't have as much experience with Wix as I do with WordPress, but generally I find that Squarespace has a different look than the Wix site. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too familiar with the difference between Squarespace and Wix in terms of which one's better than the other. I find Squarespace is a lot better for, or has more options in terms of like e-commerce and that kind of thing, the SEO stuff. But it's definitely a lot more hands-off than something like WordPress.
Well, and Squarespace also has Zendaya. So they did a Super Bowl ad with Zendaya. And it's like Squarespace.com slash Zendaya. And it looks really good. I mean, you can tell that they dressed up way beyond the normal template and it was pretty impressive. So if you got Zendaya, then you're good to go. So
You're good to
there
go.
are
Yeah.
definite cons, of course, with each of the tools.
Yeah.
Revision history, if you need that. Some of the data collection to me is always troubling with all the WYSIWYG type sites. I think I told you before, I'm limited to like 1,000 pages and I'm almost halfway there. What are some of the other cons that you see and deal with all the time?
Yeah. So when somebody first comes to me and they're like, okay, I'm thinking about having you design me a site and they're unsure about Squarespace, there's a couple questions that I ask just to make sure that Squarespace is a good fit for them before they go on. So if you're somebody who is going to have an e-commerce store and you want a ton of products, so for instance, you're a clothing line and you're going to have a whole bunch of different clothing options, I don't generally recommend Squarespace in that case. I'll kind of push towards Shopify. Now, Squarespace is doing a lot with their e-commerce, and that may be something that, eventually I'm not saying that.
Or it's basically some sort of plug-in to pull it from somewhere else.
Yes. And Shopify and Squarespace can kind of work together. So it's possible to have different combinations. It's really dependent upon what their store is. But I find at this time, Squarespace doesn't have the option to go, okay, I want to see your products based on small, medium, large, and this color and men's. Like, you can't filter as much. There is, again, plugins and different things you can do to work around that. But for somebody that doesn't want to do all those additional plugins and code, I'll generally say maybe Shopify is better for you. Photographers, let's say, that want to have galleries that they want their clients to sign in on and that kind of thing. A lot of them use, I'm forgetting the name now. Pexel, not Pexel. There's a platform that they can upload galleries and then their clients can sign in and download the galleries and things like that. Squarespace doesn't necessarily have that option. Again, there's workarounds and things we can do. But sometimes they'll kind of combine them. So it really depends on that. But if you're somebody who, okay, I want basic information on the site, I want to have maybe a blog or a podcast on the site, some gallery, that kind of thing, Squarespace is, for the most part, you're good to go. So the only times that I'll kind of sway somebody away from Squarespace, again, if they have those massive e-commerce things, or if they want a super specific fancy functionality that maybe WordPress in that case would be better for them if they want something super fancy and crazy on the site. But other than that, usually Squarespace is what I recommend.
If you had to guess, how much of your business in general is B2B type companies versus, say, individuals?
I would say it's pretty even.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I do a bit of both. So I've worked more for like I've had a couple doctors that have done stuff. So ones that were maybe more just informational, that they're like, I just want people to know to come to me and what services I offer. So I've had a couple more basic sites like that. I've had a couple course sites. So I have a doctor that runs a burnt out to badass course. And so I do stuff with her. And so it's like a course site that she's reaching out. And she also reaches out to universities and teaching universities and hospitals to work with them. So that's more of like a B2B site. So a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Well, and I guess I should have said business in general versus because it could have been a B2C site, but there are so many businesses I know who, when you say a basic site, it's still got all the functionality that most of the sites have. Yeah. And so I know a lot of SaaS companies, for example, I mean, unless they want some sort of bright, shiny object on there that you're not seeing somewhere else, you're not really giving up much. And I'm trying to think what you would give up, because another thing I was going to ask on that you basically just touched on was apps and tools. And what kind of tools do you find that people are not using enough on Squarespace sites? One, for example, we talked a little bit about Shopify integration and how those two work together. But another one is using heat maps, for example. A lot of people don't know what heat maps are in general, but there are a lot of integrations with other heat mapping tools and a lot of different things that you can load on there. What do you sort of think of as far as apps and tools that are better integrated with Squarespace, or ones that people are not taking advantage of?
Yeah, there's not many. I can't even think of any apps that I've come across that don't integrate into Squarespace in some way, because Squarespace is becoming so popular. a lot of times if they do offer an integration for WordPress, they're doing WordPress and Squarespace. There's not, I haven't really come across any that don't have a way to integrate in. Even just a block of code you put it in a code block on the site will integrate it in. I think the most popular ones is Zapier. So Zapier can kind of integrate from your website to a whole slew of different things. So that's a super popular one that generally does what I want it to. Squarespace but they bought out Acuity, which is their scheduling system. So they have scheduling in there. They are working towards a email campaign system. It's not as advanced as, let's say, ActiveCampaign or ConvertKit. But if you're just like, okay, I want to have a freebie on my site, they give me their address or their email address and it sends out a freebie. Squarespace campaigns can take care of that. So for most businesses, there is an app or an integration you can use. And yeah, so to clarify, when I say basic, I mean your general informational site. When I'm thinking more advanced, I'm thinking of, a doctor that wants a client portal that's super secure and has information. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about advanced versus a basic site. So there's tons of integrations out there. The most popular being Zapier, Acuity or ActiveCampaign, ConvertKit, like your email systems, and that sort of stuff.
Well, one of the biggest conversations I have with people looking at these sites is being found. And we're going to touch on SEO. With respect to being found, what are some of the top recommendations that you have for improving your SEO on a Squarespace site? What are the things you come across all the time that people just need to improve?
I think SEO tends to be a topic that people get very overwhelmed with very easy because you can get very, very technical with it. But the thing to remember is that search engines, let's say Google, are very smart and they're only getting smarter and they're starting to read through and be able to sift out the non-authentic strategies. So my main thing is just be authentic and make sure you're providing good quality content. If you are providing good quality content to your viewers and you are being authentic and true with what you serve and who you work with, you will work your way up. The people that tend to have a static site that don't have like a blog or some sort of content creation may have a harder time ranking up. And people that are trying to kind of get past or trick the system are the ones that are going to kind of harm themselves in terms of making their way up. So the first thing I look at, especially with Squarespace, is Squarespace has an SEO checklist that has a whole bunch of different strategies and tools and things you can do. So that's the first place we start, is just looking through and making sure they're following all of the strategies Squarespace is recommending. They have all the settings they need to have set. That kind of thing. So that's the first thing I check. And then the next part of that is looking at the actual content on their site and making sure that they are having their keywords authentically. There's a whole bunch of different strategies for content, but the main thing is to remember that with whatever you're doing on your site, you're trying to build trust with the search engines, which means your page titles are not clickbaity. People are coming to your site and staying on your site because you have good quality stuff. So you're building that trust, and then you're properly communicating what the site is about. So you're having proper page titles, your tags, your categories, your keywords, the structure of your page, that kind of thing. So my biggest, without getting too deep into technical strategies and terms, the biggest thing to do is just make sure that you are regularly producing good quality content that people want to come to your site and stay on your site. And as people do that, it will build trust and you'll work your way up.
So let's get a little bit technical though. How about off-page SEO? What's the biggest thing you generally see?
Yeah, so that is one of the things within Squarespace's checklist is Google Search Console. So having a Search Console account and submitting your sitemap sounds a lot trickier than it is. There's already a sitemap built for you by Squarespace. It's just your domain name / sitemap.xml. And you just put that link into your Google Search Console account and it crawls it. And then you regularly can kind of check in and it will let you know if there's issues popping up like mobile issues or pages that aren't being read or indexed, it's called, that kind of thing. So submitting your sitemap to Google Console is the way to get it to crawl your site and really know what's going on.
So you just mentioned mobile. Is there anything about mobile responsive capabilities of Squarespace that we need to call out and pay attention to differently? Because I know from a design aspect, it's really good.
Yeah, so Squarespace automatically makes your pages mobile friendly, but there is some adjustments that I like to make using code just to kind of push it a little bit further. And that's more so just, resizing some images tends to be the biggest thing, making sure your background images look good on mobile. But as long as you have the blocks in the right way on desktop, then they'll look good on mobile. So my biggest suggestion is, as you're building your page, look at how it looks on desktop, then flip over to mobile right away and see how it looks, and kind of keep going back and forth. That way you're not, playing with your site and getting exactly how you want it to look on desktop, and you're so happy, you flip over to mobile and you're like, this looks horrible. So I always suggest kind of going back and forth as you're designing to make sure that the blocks are dragged in the right order, so that on mobile it's also displaying how you want it to be. But for non-coders and people not wanting to use code, it does do it sort of automatically. I would say 80% of the site will look great on mobile. And then as you get more familiar with code, or if you hire somebody to help you, we can use code to just get that last 20% to be looking good as well.
CSS. So when thinking about custom cascading style sheets, or as the kids call it, custom CSS, how should people look at adding code to a website or do more cooler things to a Squarespace site, without pushing too many limits and blowing up your site?
I think the main thing to remember, or the biggest thing I tell people when they're first starting out, it is very hard to completely ruin and crash your site with CSS. So if you're going to put code on your site and it's going to crash and destroy everything, most likely it's going to be JavaScript that's written in a different part of your Squarespace site. So if you're just starting out with code and you're a little bit nervous, CSS is the place to start, and that just adjust your styles. So your colors, sometimes your sizing, that kind of thing is what you're going to be doing with CSS. And that's a great place to start, because if it doesn't work, you just delete it or play with it and you're good to go. So there's no harm in thinking, okay, if I add this style, suddenly my website's going to crash. It doesn't work like that in Squarespace. So CSS is a good place to start on that. There is lots of free code out there in YouTube and Google. If you're a little bit more serious about using code, then if I put a little plug in there, I do have a resource a membership out there that, is for people that are, designers that are adding code all the time. I have a resource that's maybe a little bit more efficient for them than, YouTube and blogs and things like that. But there are definitely lots of free resources out there to help you with that, such as my YouTube channel, where you can find a whole bunch of just copy and paste stuff, and then, alter a word here and there to get it to work for you.
Now, granted, you work as a freelancer to help build out these sites, and your site very robust. You have a lot of content on there. Is there at any point where you feel like it would overwhelm you, where you would need to take it to another platform or recode it in some form or fashion, your own site?
No,
that wouldn't be very authentic, I guess.
I wouldn't think so. Not with the way the functionality that I want on the site. So
you've got an e-commerce page, you've got a blog, you've got all your other regular pages. You got a lot of images on there.
I do. Yeah. I have got e-commerce. I've got plugins that I sell through my Squarespace site. I've got my blog on there. I also have a member area, like an area that's hidden behind a paywall. So I do have lots of stuff that is hosted on there. And I haven't found that, I wish that I had done this on somewhere else. It's been, I have a couple different apps and stuff that I integrate in to help me. But for the most part, it's all done right through Squarespace. And I haven't found that.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of anything else that anybody wants if they can't. You can add your custom fonts. You can add custom buttons, and the way you want to do basic HTML responses change differently. To me, I know a lot of the people with very nice sites, and it's not because of the functionality or capabilities of the platform. 99% of the time it's based on their color scheme. And does it really look professional? Do their images look amazing? There's a lot of times the difference between one brand or another, and a lot of times even the personal brand, is the packaging.
Yeah. And I would say I've worked with over 100 Squarespace designers one-on-one, and I have yet to tell somebody that we couldn't do it in Squarespace. So if there's a will, there's a way. The only time that I say, maybe we want to have a separate integration here, or maybe this isn't for you, is if somebody has a massive e-commerce store that they feel Squarespace's stuff wouldn't work for. They might have a Shopify site that they integrate in. I've had that where they integrate it into their Squarespace site and have both. Other than that, I have yet to tell somebody, no, we can't do that. and this isn't the platform for you.
So when is the right time to hire a freelancer like you to come in? Because there's all kinds of ways of thinking about it, whether or not they just want you to do all the work and sit down in a discovery call and you put it together, or do you generally find that it's better served with your time to go in and do bug fixes or whatever they may interpret as bug fixes? Or how do you sort of look at that relationship you have with most of your customers as a freelancer?
I would say it's generally your time. So if you are somebody that just does not have the time, then a freelancer is the way to go. If you're somebody that has the time to play around with it and you're the willingness to learn a new platform, then try it out on your own first and see how it goes. I think the main things that you mentioned, colors, the main things that I say is find a template that is closest to what you want it to look like. Make sure your colors are consistent and that it's super user friendly and easy to find their way around your site. So the navigation's nice and simple. You have buttons everywhere leading them to the different areas of site that they want, that would be best for them. That's what makes it look professional. Obviously, a freelancer might do some kind of fancy things to make it have a wow factor, but it's definitely possible to have a really nice looking site on your own by following the template and, making sure your photos and colors are consistent.
Well, and again, you said template. This is just like saying basic. There's so much more that you can do to change up the template. So there's no spoon with this. You've helped me with some code, and by law, as a Canadian, you're incredibly polite, which comes with the whole territory. But Rebecca, I asked this of all my guests on the show on a shark's perspective. No sharks that I know of in Lake Ontario next door to you, but what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh gosh. I don't know if it's my favorite kind of shark, but I recently learned about the existence of a goblin shark, and that kind of terrifies me.
Yeah, I've never seen one in person.
No.
but I've seen, I take it back. I've never seen a live one in person, but I've seen one that was a mummified. And
oh, wow.
The pictures they're ugly as can be. Well, Rebecca, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Sure.
All right. This is probably going to be too much of a softball based off earlier conversation, but number 1, a lot of CSS in a no-code website or not very much?
I would say if you can do it without code, that's always best. So if there's a way to do it without code, do that first. CSS renders really fast, which means it loads really fast. So there's no harm in having a ton of CSS. Just make sure whatever code you have in there is necessary and that you're not writing code for something that you don't need to write code for.
There's no slowdown errors at all, or I guess that would all be the JavaScript part of it then. So there wouldn't, yeah.
And again, that kind of depends if the CSS is written really poorly, or, you're saying, okay, I want this text blue. And then later down, you're saying, I want it green. And later down, you're saying, I want it red.
Well-written CSS does not slow down. Yeah. Well-written CSS.
Well-written CSS should not slow down your site.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Number 2, this may seem like an odd question, but stay with me. Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You, later made even more famous by Whitney Houston, or Dolly's 9 to 5, made even more famous by the movie 9 to 5. Which of those 2 would you pick?
Oh, the I Will Always Love You, I think.
One of the most played songs of all time, but Dolly did a Super Bowl ad for Squarespace where they revamped the song in the commercial, from 9 to 5 to 5 to 9. So if you Google Dolly and Squarespace, you'll find that video. I don't know if you
I'll
knew
have to
that or
check
not,
it out.
but it was, I think it was a 2021 ad. It was pre-Zendaya. So number 3, for website builders not called Squarespace, we're going to do the W versions, Wix or WordPress.
Wix.
Why so? Ease of use?
Easy. Yeah. Ease of use, less hands-on.
Less capabilities, but easier to use.
Yes. Yeah.
Number 4, if you could design the websites for these Canadian singers, then who would you choose? And we're going to do a boy version and a girl pick.
Okay.
For the girls, Celine Dion or Shania Twain. And for the boys, The Weeknd or Justin Bieber.
I'd have to say Shania Twain and The Weeknd.
I'm good with both of those. Shania was the one I was most, Celine had Titanic, but that you can only do so much with imagery.
I love Celine Dion, but I'm a country girl through and through, so I'm gonna have to go with Shania Twain.
Man, I feel like a woman for this answer at least. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread.
Oh, I don't know if I can choose.
Gotta pick. It's
Oh,
prisoner's dilemma.
I'm gonna have to say cornbread.
Okay. No, it's better with that Canadian maple syrup anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So Rebecca, where can people find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing, see the videos and your Squarespace advice and more?
Yeah. So my website, obviously, RebeccaGraceDesigns.com is the first place to go for seeing all about me. I offer full website design as well as one-to-one help sessions. If you just want a bit of help to get started or with something on your site, that the one-on-one help's the way to go. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Awesome. Rebecca, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
So there was my conversation with Rebecca Grace of Rebecca Grace Designs. She's a Squarespace expert and website designer who helps hundreds of Squarespace designers push past the limitations of the Squarespace editor to design beautiful custom websites that are mobile friendly and search engine optimized. Let's look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, whether your site is on Squarespace or WordPress, Wix, or custom built on some other platform, for most people in their personal brands, and even with a significant amount of businesses, the platform is not insignificant. But whatever those needs are, they shouldn't trump the user looking at your site, and if they can't find what they need to move forward, then you've got a problem. And a lot of times developers create an overcomplicated mess that only a handful of people on a team can fix. And while that control is important, it does not always create a user-friendly site that can be created with simpler tools that site builders like Squarespace can create. Leverage simplicity. The intricate site you think you're building may end up being a lot more for your own benefit than theirs. And that's a problem too. Simplicity should be for their benefit, and if developed the right way, it can serve you as well. Second, building $1 million site doesn't mean you have to shell out a ton of money. Rebecca and I will both remind you of that. There's so much more that like just having a good eye for design. Better images can make or break the look of your site. Having well-positioned call to action buttons can provide a massive return. Having a good style guide so colors make sense, that's critical. Look, with the right photography, I can make almost any site look amazing. I'm still working on my own images too. Reminds me, I gotta start that diet and then get new pictures. Third, although a great website is important for almost all brands, personal and corporate, remember that it's just one part of the bigger puzzle. It's part of the packaging and indeed important. Just make sure there's plenty beyond the packaging so that it can be a great gift to your business. There are a lot of speakers, for example, who think that having the most perfect looking website will do it all for them, and then they spend way too much money. But what if their speech isn't great? It's part of the package, but not all of it. Stay focused on what really matters. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I'm so grateful to everyone who listens. Please consider writing a review and letting me know your thoughts on the show. Go out into the world and design with some grace, because I know your baby's not ugly. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.